Hello everybody, welcome back to M3 Crypto. You have officially graduated the initial training phase, let's say. I have laid out the entire strategy, everything that needs to be known about it in the first two episodes. Now we're going to be doing the fun part, the actual backtesting. Like I've said before, backtesting is a tedious process, and there's a reason why I kind of resisted making videos about this. The reason being, it's not visually very interesting. But as I promised, we found a way. We found a way to make it interesting. We are going to be listening to podcasts that are generated from scripts that I made, okay? And so basically what's going to happen, there are two voices in this generated podcast that sound totally realistic for all intents and purposes. And in this episode, they are reacting to a script from the late 90s, which stars Russell Crowe, and it is about the discovery of the first T-Rex skeleton. Now, this doesn't sound that interesting, but imagine you'd never seen a T-Rex, right? Like, imagine you had no idea that existed. Then you're digging up the fossils with your team, and you're slowly unearthing the entire skeleton. By the time that you get to the head, if you're starting with the feet or something, maybe they're kind of sticking out, I don't know. By the time you get to the head, you've discovered the scariest creature to ever exist. I mean, seriously, what could be more frightening than a Tyrannosaurus Rex if you had no idea that existed? Like, think of how scared you would be if you were locked in a room with a Siberian tiger. You know, maybe it's a nice tiger, I don't know, but it's an 8-foot long thing that could tear your face off without even thinking about it. Now imagine that creature was 2 stories tall. Imagine it didn't even have arms. It was just a giant toothed mouth with legs that was more powerful than you can even comprehend with your brain. Magnitudes larger than the largest land animal that exists nowadays. So that's what this script is about. It's kind of loosely based on A Beautiful Mind. I'm not going to give it away because we're about to listen to it. But this is a podcast that is discussing that. Imagine you had a movie podcast and you could have them discuss anything you gave them. So we gave them this script with Russell Crowe. All right, and we're going to play that, and the rest is just going to be me back testing stuff. Mostly this is fun to listen to, but you can see what I'm doing as well. All right, we're going to hit play in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to dig a little deeper into something really cool. You guys sent us a movie script called Leviathan, and wow, this isn't your average dinosaur flick. This one's got Russell Crowe, and it gets into like the headspace of what it means to discover something truly monstrous.
Yeah, it's really smart how the writer did that. I mean, Tyrannosaurus Rex has always been a star, right?
Right.
Both for paleontology and our imaginations. But Leviathan takes it a step further. It uses the T-Rex to explore our deep-seated fears about nature.
So we're not just talking about digging up bones here.
Yeah.
We've got a lead paleontologist, Dr. Jonathan Creed, and he goes on this crazy emotional journey alongside the scientific discovery.
Yeah, there's some really interesting questions the script brings up. How does the pressure of a discovery, this huge mess with someone like Dr. Creed, what kind of internal struggles does he have to deal with? And what does this whole story tell us about our own fascination with the unknown? Or even our fear of it?
Let's get into the plot. The script starts in 1902, Wyoming. We meet Dr. Creed, a total genius, but you can tell he's got some baggage. He's leading this expedition, and they're clearly looking for something big. Right off the bat, there's a line that'll give you chills. Creed says, "There is something buried here, something old as the bones of the earth."
Choosing to set it in Wyoming back then is interesting, too. You know, Wyoming in the early 1900s was still pretty wild, untamed. It's kind of like a mirror for that feeling of going into the unknown that paleontology is all about.
And then, bam, they hit a massive fossilized bone sticking out of the rock. It's like striking gold, but in this case, the gold might be a nightmare just waiting to happen.
It's worth pointing out that the script does a good job with the actual paleontology. It's not just, oh, look, big skeleton. We see the team doing real work. Harriet, the geologist, is analyzing rock layers, and Daniel, the assistant, is carefully keeping track of every bone fragment. It shows that it's this careful and collaborative process.
This shows the dedication and scientific rigor, which we don't always see in dinosaur movies.
Exactly. And as they go through this careful process, we start to see Dr. Creed's internal struggles come out. The more they uncover of this massive creature, the more fixated he gets. Nightmares start to plague him. Visions of this terrifying reptilian form, jaws open wide.
He keeps bringing up Leviathan, from the Bible, specifically the book of Job. It's like he doesn't see the T-Rex as a scientific marvel, but as this biblical monster coming back to life.
That biblical imagery is woven in really well. Leviathan, this giant sea serpent, it represents those forces of nature that are out of our control. It adds a whole other level to the fear and the awe of the discovery.
There's a line that really captures this. Creed says, "I feel as though we're unearthing Leviathan. Perhaps we're calling forth something that slept for eons best left buried."
Yeah.
It's like he's truly scared of what they're digging up.
That line perfectly sums up the conflict at the heart of the script, and maybe even at the heart of paleontology. The thrill of discovery versus the fear of what you might unleash.
And it gets worse. As they find more of the skeleton, his nightmares get more intense. He sees it moving, hears it roar. Creed is completely consumed by this T-Rex. He barely sleeps. He pushes his team to their limits. He even describes it as a mouth on legs, a terror unrivaled. His fascination is turning into an obsession.
What's interesting is the script doesn't make this obsession all bad. It's a mix of scientific passion and genuine fear. He wants to understand this creature, unlock its secrets, but he's also terrified by its power.
It's like a double-edged sword. This scientific discovery, the more they learn, the more unstable he becomes.
And then the storm hits, and this storm, it comes at just the right time to completely break Dr. Creed.
It's like the storm is mirroring what's happening inside him. There's this scene where he's frantically trying to protect the exposed bones from the wind and rain. He sees the T-Rex fully formed roaring at him in the lightning.
It's a visual representation of his mind falling apart. The script is really good at building tension, blurring the line between what's real and what's a nightmare, for both Dr. Creed and the audience.
After the storm, he breaks down. He confesses to Harriet, "I've seen it walk. In my mind, I can't separate reality from that monstrous vision anymore."
This is a huge turning point in the script. He's admitting that his fear is eating him alive. It sets up this confrontation with his own inner demons, which is something that everyone can relate to, even outside of paleontology.
But before we go there, let's talk about the T-Rex itself.
Okay.
Because it's obviously more than just a pile of bones in this story.
For sure. The T-Rex becomes this powerful symbol. It represents the raw power of nature, the kind of force that can inspire awe and terror at the same time.
It's like it's tapping into this primal fear that's deep inside all of us, something we can't escape. And by digging it up, Dr. Creed has to confront that fear head on.
And that's something that resonates with everyone, right? Even though we live in this world where we think we've tamed nature, there's always that underlying fear of the unknown, of the things we can't control.
Exactly. And the way the script links the T-Rex to Leviathan, it makes it more than just a dinosaur skeleton. It's this mythical creature, a symbol of something ancient and powerful that can shake us to our core.
And that's what makes the script so interesting. It taps into that universal fascination and maybe even fear of the monstrous, the things that go bump in the night. It reminds us that even with all our science, we're still vulnerable to nature.
Okay, so we've got this intense psychological drama happening alongside this amazing scientific discovery. But what I find really interesting is that the script doesn't give us an easy answer to this conflict between science and fear.
You're right. Dr. Creed doesn't just conquer his fear. He learns to live with it. He accepts its power while still being passionate about science. And I think there's a really deep message in that for all of us.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between logic and our gut reactions, those primal instincts that make us human.
It's about recognizing that those instincts, even fear, aren't always bad. They can be powerful motivators if we learn to use them.
And I love how the script shows this through what Dr. Creed does. He doesn't just suddenly get over his fear. It's a process. One of the first things he does is give the creature a name, Tyrannosaurus rex. It's almost like by classifying it, bringing it into the world of science, he gains some control over his fear.
That act of naming is so important. It takes this monstrous unknown and turns it into something knowable, something we can study and understand. It doesn't erase the fear, but it lets him function, lets him keep working.
It's like he's taming the beast, at least in his mind. And in doing so, he's not just advancing paleontology, he's sharing a story about human courage, about facing your fears head on.
And that leads us perfectly into the ending of the script, which is both ambiguous and thought-provoking. We see the T-Rex skeleton standing tall in museum. It's this incredible spectacle. But we also see Dr. Creed back in the Wyoming wilderness, clearly still haunted by what he went through. It's a reminder that while we can study and categorize nature, we can never truly conquer its mystery.
And that ending leaves us with some big questions, doesn't it? What would happen if we discovered a creature like this today? Would we react any differently?
Would we be able to handle the scientific wonder and the potential chaos and fear at the same time?
Would we see it as a monster? A scientific marvel? Or both?
Those are questions worth thinking about. And it shows how powerful the script is that it makes us think about these things long after the story is over. But there's another layer to this script we need to discuss.
You're right. We've talked about the psychological drama, the symbolism, the fear and wonder. But there's this whole other element that makes Leviathan so special, the way it portrays the actual work of paleontology.
What people often forget amidst all the dinosaur excitement is the sheer amount of dedication, the meticulous work that goes into finding and understanding these ancient creatures.
Exactly. It's not all about glamorous expeditions and big aha moments. Leviathan does a great job of showing the long hours, the careful process of digging up fossils, cleaning them, debating their meaning, and dealing with setbacks. It feels very real and relatable.
And that's so important because it humanizes science. Behind every big discovery are people with their own stories, their own struggles, their own triumphs.
And speaking of triumphs, I think we need to talk more about that ending. It's not your typical happy ending, but it is powerful. Dr. Creed doesn't just overcome his fears. He learns to live with them. He finds a way to balance his awe and terror of the T-Rex with his scientific curiosity.
It's a great message, especially for anyone interested in science or any field that pushes the boundaries of what we know. There will be times when you find things that are challenging, even scary. But that doesn't mean you should give up.
It's about finding the courage to keep going, to keep asking questions, to keep exploring, even when it makes you uncomfortable.
That's a great point. But there's something else I find interesting about Dr. Creed's journey in this script.
Oh, what's that?
Well, it made me think about how we often see scientists as these purely rational people, detached from emotion. But Leviathan shows us that even the most brilliant minds can be affected by fear, by awe.
By those primal instincts we were talking about.
Exactly. And I think that's something important to remember, especially today when there's so much distrust of science and experts.
You're right. It's easy to forget that scientists are people too, driven by the same curiosity, the same desire to understand the world, even when it's something as amazing and terrifying as a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Speaking of which, I think it's time we move on to the symbolism of the T-Rex itself, because it's not just a scary monster in the script, is it?
Definitely not. It's a symbol, a metaphor for something much bigger. But before we unpack all of that, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to dive even deeper into Leviathan.
We were talking about the T-Rex as a symbol in this Leviathan script.
And it's not just a big, scary dinosaur.
Right.
It represents something deeper, something that gets to our, primal instincts.
It's like the T-Rex is this primal fear we all have, the fear of the unknown, the wild things, the things that go bump in the night. And when he digs it up, both literally and figuratively, Dr. Creed has to face that fear head on.
It makes me think about why we're still so fascinated by these ancient predators. Is it their size? Their power? Or is there something more to it? Like it's a reflection of how small we are compared to nature.
The script does something really clever. It connects the T-Rex to Leviathan, that sea monster from the Bible. It takes the creature beyond science and makes it this almost mythical thing representing chaos and primal forces.
I love how the script uses those biblical images. It adds a whole other layer to the story. It's like the T-Rex becomes a symbol of these ancient myths we all share, reminding us that even with all our science, we can't escape these primal fears.
And what's interesting is that the script doesn't offer an easy answer to this tension between science and fear. Dr. Creed doesn't just conquer his fear, he learns to live with it, which I think is a much more realistic and profound message.
It's like he accepts that knowledge and discovery come with a price, that sometimes digging into the unknown means facing the darker parts of ourselves and the world.
And that's where the script really shines. It doesn't shy away from the complicated parts of being human, the way reason and emotion work together, the struggle to balance scientific understanding with our gut instincts.
So he learns to live with the fear, but he also does something very specific to try to understand it and control it.
Right. He names it Tyrannosaurus Rex. That act of naming is so important. It's like he's taking this scary, unknowable thing and bringing it into the world of science.
It's as if by naming it, he tames it, he gets some power over his fear, and it lets him keep working. lets him share his discovery.
And by doing that, he's not just doing something for paleontology. He's sharing a story about courage and resilience, about the importance of facing our fears, even the ones that feel like they come from the deepest parts of ourselves.
And the ending of the script is so powerful. It's ambiguous. We see the T-Rex skeleton in a museum, this amazing thing. But we also see Dr. Creed back in Wyoming, still clearly affected by what he experienced. It's a reminder that we can study and categorize nature, but we can never really understand all its mysteries. It makes you wonder, what would happen if we found a creature like this today? Would we react differently than Dr. Creed?
Would we be able to balance the wonder of science with the potential for fear and chaos?
Would we see it as a monster, a scientific marvel, or both?
It's a question that makes us think about how we relate to nature and the limits of what we can know. But there's something else in the script we haven't talked about yet, and it's something you specifically wanted to look at. How it shows the actual work of paleontology.
Exactly, because it's not all dramatic discoveries and big existential crises. There's a lot of hard work, dedication, and collaboration that goes into this kind of science.
And the script captures that really well. We see the long hours, the careful work of digging up and cleaning the fossils, the debates about what they mean, the moments of doubt. It feels very real, very grounded.
It makes the scientists feel like real people with their passions and frustrations and quirks. And I think that's important because it helps people relate to science more.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that behind every big discovery, there are people with their own stories, their own struggles, their own victories. And speaking of victories, I think it's worth mentioning that ending again. It's not a simple happy ending, but it's powerful.
Dr. Creed doesn't just get over his fears. He learns to live with them, to find a balance between being amazed and terrified by the T-Rex and his scientific curiosity. And that's such an important message for anyone interested in science or anything that pushes the limits of knowledge. There will be times when you find things that are hard, even scary.
But you don't have to give up. It's about finding the courage to keep going, to keep asking questions, to keep exploring, even when it makes you uncomfortable.
You know, this whole conversation is making me think about how we often see scientists as these super logical people with no emotions. But Leviathan shows us that even geniuses can be affected by fear, by awe.
By those primal instincts we were talking about.
Exactly. And I think that's important to remember, especially these days when people don't trust science and experts as much.
You're right. It's easy to forget that scientists are people too. They're driven by curiosity. They want to understand the world, even when it's something as amazing and terrifying as a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Right. And Leviathan reminds us that trying to learn new things isn't always easy or comfortable. It can make us question our beliefs, face our fears, and even wonder about our place in the universe. But those challenges are what make the journey worthwhile, because in the end, it's about understanding more. Not just about the world around us, but about ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think that leads us perfectly into our final thoughts on this amazing script.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we mentioned earlier, the human side of science.
Yeah, the idea that scientists aren't just robots, but real people with curiosity, passion, and sometimes even fear.
And Leviathan does such a good job of showing that we see Dr. Creed struggling with his own problems, but we also see the friendship between the scientists, their shared goals, the excitement of discovery. It's a reminder that science is a human thing, driven by human emotions.
And those emotions, even the negative ones like fear, can be important for science. They can push us to ask new questions, to go beyond what we know, to face the unknown.
And ultimately those challenges, those moments of fear and doubt, make the triumphs of scientific discovery even more meaningful.
But before we get too deep into the philosophy of it all, let's come back down to earth for a second. There's one part of Leviathan that I think needs a little more attention.
And that is?
Well, we've talked a lot about psychology and symbolism in the script, but I think it's important to point out how much cinematic potential this story has.
Oh, absolutely. The script has these vivid descriptions and intense scenes that would be amazing on the big screen.
I can just picture that storm scene, wind and rain all around Dr. Creed, him desperately trying to protect the bones, lightning flashes showing the T-Rex skeleton, and those scary visions he's having, blurring the line between real and imaginary.
And the scene where they find that huge bone sticking out of the rock, the awe and wonder mixed with a little fear.
And of course, the climax, Dr. Creed finally facing his fear, his Leviathan, however they show that in the film.
It's got everything you need for an epic movie. Visuals, action. It's like Jurassic Park meets Heart of Darkness with a bit of The Revenant thrown in.
And with Russell Crowe in it, the acting will be amazing. He's got that intensity to play Dr. Creed's struggles perfectly. It's like the role was made for him.
Okay, But let's not forget about the other characters. Harriet, the geologist, Daniel, the assistant. They're not just there in the background. They're well-developed characters with their own motivations and stories.
Right, and the relationships between the characters, the friendship, the tension, the humor, it all adds depth to the story.
It's like Leviathan is both a thrilling adventure and a deep look at what it means to be human.
And that's what makes it such a great script. It has something for everyone. Action suspense, psychology philosophy, and even accurate paleontology.
Speaking of which, I think it's time we shifted gears a bit and talked about. So what were you saying about shifting gears?
Oh yeah, we've really gotten into Leviathan, the exciting plot, the complex characters, those themes that make you think. But there's one more thing I think we should talk about before we wrap up.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's how the script mixes different genres so well. We see adventure, sci-fi, psychological thriller, even a bit of horror. It's a powerful combination that keeps you on the edge of your seat and makes you think at the same time.
You're right. Leviathan is hard to put in just one box. It takes familiar things and twists them, creating something totally new and captivating. It's more than just a dinosaur movie. It's a story about fear, obsession, the power of nature, and in the end, what it means to be human.
Exactly. And that mix of genres makes it appeal to a lot of people. You've got the dinosaur fans who love the T-Rex. You've got people who are into psychology and will be fascinated by Dr. Creed's breakdown. And you've got those who just love a good suspenseful story.
And don't forget how visually stunning it could be. This script is practically screaming to be a big blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
I can already see those wide shots of the Wyoming wilderness, the intense digging scenes, the scary nightmares, and of course the T-Rex brought to life with amazing CGI.
Imagine that scene where they first find that giant bone, the awe and wonder mixed with a bit of fear. It would be an unforgettable movie moment.
And the storm, the wind and rain, the lightning showing the skeleton. It's perfect for a visually and emotionally powerful scene.
And with someone like Russell Crowe, the acting will be incredible. He's got the intensity and presence to perfectly capture Dr. Creed's struggles. It's like the role was made for him.
It's funny. We've talked about so much in Leviathan, the meeting of the T-Rex, the science of paleontology, the ethics of it all. But we haven't really talked about how entertaining the script is. And it is really entertaining.
It's one of those scripts you can't put down. You get drawn into the story, you care about the characters, you want to know what happens next. It balances suspense with action and terror, keeping you hooked the whole time.
And that's what makes a truly great script.
Right.
When it can make you think, make you feel, and even give you chills. Leviathan does all of that and more.
It's a script that stays with you. It makes you think, it makes you feel, and it leaves you wanting more. And that's what we try to do here on the Deep Dive. Find those hidden gems, those pieces of content that make you think, spark your curiosity, and leave a lasting impression.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Leviathan, I want you to think about this. What are the Leviathans in your own life? What are those things that fascinate you but also scare you a little?
Remember, discovering new things isn't always easy. It can be hard, uncomfortable, even scary sometimes. But it's in those moments that we often find the best rewards. We learn more, we understand more, and we grow as people.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Leviathan. We hope you enjoyed it, found it interesting, and maybe even a little challenging.
And we hope it inspires you to find your own Leviathans, to explore the unknown, and to always keep learning.
All right. Well, that is our first episode. It's like we're hanging out and listening to podcasts together, except our podcasts you can't find anywhere else on the internet, of course. Yeah, normally these are probably going to be funny, but this was just kind of a cool idea for a movie. Yeah. Eventually, when we're all billionaires, perhaps we can, fund the making of this film. But until then, we're just going to have to listen to this. As for the trading, you guys probably saw, we got 3 trades that were worth recording. And the only one that's really going to be kept, I think, would be this one. And when we have a trade that I would actually do according to the criteria, we do the green date over here. The criteria, we're still early on, so I'm not 100%, but I know for sure that we're going to do the ones where all 5 factors agree. And we had the second best volume pattern. So I'm sure that green volume pattern with green over here is something we're going to do. And we're probably going to do yellow volume pattern with green as well. Now we're doing a running total for 2 scenarios. One where we take profit at 1.5 profit. You know, watch the second video to explain what that is. And we're doing a scenario where we take profit at 2-to-1 ratios, risk to reward ratio. Because we want to see which is better to do. A lot of times 2-to-1 is the best, sometimes 1.5-to-1 is the best, and you just have to test it meticulously to see which is actually superior. So we are testing both of those. But yeah, we had one trade here out of all of that that is keepable, and it was a success. There's a couple other little minor things I want to say that I forgot to say in the first 2 videos. For this green line, which is the center line of the Bollinger Bands and the moving averages here, if the candle that we're starting out with is over halfway through that line becomes the stop loss. Here's an example. So this was the normal risk amount, 7/8. In this case, it's through this magenta moving average, so we actually put the stop loss about there. I estimated it at 6/8 because it's hard to get it exactly right, and it doesn't matter if you're off by 1, you know. So that becomes the risk amount, which means that like a 2-to-1, if it's 6/8, is wow, I need more coffee. It's 136 that we're looking for, and it did make it to that. It made it well past that. 136 would be there. So it clearly did go there. The only thing else we're looking for is if it goes to 6/8 and then goes back, because we do the thing where if it goes 1-to-1 and then goes back, we reset the stop loss to buy in, and it's a break-even trade, which did happen on this first one, basically. That's a way of saving losses, preventing losses. But it doesn't seem, we'd have to really replay it to know for sure. But it looks like the point at which it went to 6/8 was during this candle, and then it never went back all the way. So looks like a successful trade to me. There is a tiny bit of guesswork with minute details like that sometimes, but you're still getting an idea of whether the strategy works holistically. Anyway, that's the first episode of M3 Crypto here, where we're doing the podcast thing. Tell me comment below what topics you would like to hear a podcast generated on. Give me ideas, and we might do them. If I find some really good ones, it's like it'll be really fun to listen to. You can see how realistic it is. It sounds like you're really listening to a podcast. So yeah. Also, we're starting 2024. We're doing all the charts. This was Bitcoin. And yeah, we're doing a year's worth of data. And we did almost a month worth of data. So that means 12 more episodes, 75 times. That's how many of these we're going to have to do to test the strategy. So thanks for watching, and let's stop both of these at the same time. All right, have a good one, guys.